And we should now be underway. So it is time for our second town hall Zoom. This one is going to be about athlete performance, and in particular, the way that the club views the performance of our athletes and the way that we hope you, the parents, will view it as well. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel just more equipped as a parent to be able to help your athlete if they're ever having a hard time or anything like that, or just really know what to expect when you engage with the club and the various groups that you're in at the various levels. So let's go ahead and jump in. A quick overview. I'm going to go over some of the goals that ABSC has for athlete performance. We'll talk about how we measure their progress at swim meets and also at practice, how we measure their progress. I'm going to show you a little chart that I've found helpful over the years that kind of demonstrates a progress expectation over time. We'll also give a few just simple expectations for parents and what to do when your athlete is discouraged, because that will happen from time to time. Anytime you commit to something with big goals and do it, maybe a little bit more long-term than just like a rec league or something like that, there's going to be highs and lows and ups and downs. So we'll go over all that. And finally, we'll discuss, ABSC's sort of big picture, which is developing the whole athlete. So to jump right in, see here, there we go. If you don't take anything else away, this is what ABSC thinks about athlete performance from the great philosopher Ricky Bobby. If you're not first, you're last, or if you ain't first, you're last. So that will conclude our presentation. Hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next. No, I'm just kidding. Great movie, great philosopher. Unfortunately, not true of swimming. And as you guys have probably seen in a lot of instances, and will see many of you this weekend, there's going to be a lot of kids in the meet. And so when you've got an event with 60 swimmers in it, you're going to have one first place swimmer and a lot of not first place swimmers. And what does that mean for the first place swimmer? And what does that mean for everybody else? Because, people can be misled no matter what the scenario is there. So, but just to give you sort of a big picture, away from Ricky Bobby, but what ABSC actually believes as far as, how we view athlete performance. We try to keep our mission and vision statement in mind. Our mission statement is building enthusiastic team members and athletes of character through swimming. And that to us comes first and foremost when it comes to athlete development. We hope to develop them as people and members of our team just as much as fast swimmers. And our vision to serve our community by providing a transformational experience for our swimmers and families that allows them to grow in leadership and character. Now, that's all a little bit more abstract, and I'll get into some of that in a few minutes. But, just if you want sort of an overview of our really high level, big picture goals, we hope to create finalists at our divisionals meet. So if you're 10 and under, placing in the top 10, they don't actually do finals for 10 and under, but placing in the top 10 in their events. And if you're 11 and over, then making finals in your age group. Ideally winning divisionals. We had lots of divisionals champions last year at our big championship meet of, the Northeast Divisional Championships here in Northeast Georgia. And we also want to create state qualifying swimmers, and we want to try to win our team size group at the state meet. So we are in the large team division. There's 4 divisions at the state meet. There's a small team division, a medium, a large, and an extra large. We are in the large team division because we are in the mid 300s in terms of number of athletes on our team. The extra large division, I don't anticipate us joining that anytime soon, because that's your Dynamos and Swim Atlantas and Chattahoochee Golds. And I think the threshold to be in the extra large division is you have to have like 750 athletes or something. So we're a good ways away from that one. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So winning those state meets or performing well at the state meets, we want to create college athletes as well. We have had a lot of success the last few years putting kids on college rosters, everything from NAIA to Division I and everything else in between. And finally, this last one is sort of has grown more over the years, but generally we want to serve our community, whatever their desired level of commitment and success in swimming might be, whether they just want to do it for recreation and fun, or whether they want to really try to take their talents to the next level. And now, we used to have another club locally, Summer Hill, and they are not running a year-round program this year. So ABSC is literally the only year-round program, unless you go up to Gainesville or over to, I guess you can go over to like Swim Atlanta, Hamilton Mill, or you can go down to I think Morgan County still has year-round team down there at Morgan County Marlins, but there's not a lot. And so we feel the burden and we feel the desire and the goal to try to meet the needs of our community as much as we can, since we are the show in town at the moment. Group by group, here are some of our expectations, and you can sort of find this breakdown on our website and in our parent handbook. But for the GUPS group, the goal is simply to learn the sport. And people don't always know what that means. Maybe I'll clean that up and make it less ambiguous in the future. But essentially, like when you come from summer league or swim lessons, you know the sport to an extent, but how much do you actually really know the sport? Like, what is it like to be a part of a club swim team and participate in club swim meets and all that? So we want the GUPS to learn the 4 strokes, do 25s in a meet, maybe some 50s, and complete the 10 and under IM ready, which I'll get into that in a little bit as well. Pups, we want them to learn to race. So they are going to complete the next level up there, the IM tough, which is a different set of events that they would do in a swim meet. And then their technique needs to get them ready for aerobic training. So ideally, by the time a kid is done with the pups, they could have a good foundation of fly back, breast and free that will allow them to move up to the super pups and start training aerobically when they get there, or at least the beginnings of aerobic training. Super pups is expand and grow. And the big goal of the super pups group is to add as many events to your event list as possible. So you go from being a swimmer who can do like, 50s of the strokes, maybe the 100s, maybe a 200 free, maybe a 200 IM if you're in the pups. By the time you get to supers, you want to learn and stretch yourself to be able to do everything up from a 50 freestyle to a 1000 freestyle. And you want to be able to do a 200 backstroke and a 200 fly and a 400 IM and a 200 IM and all these things. So that's a huge goal of the supers. So we start doing aerobic training in the super pups so they can do those longer events. And that's where we also see the kids typically start to get pretty fast. They oftentimes become finalists at divisionals. They'll qualify for state, maybe be a state finalist. That tends to start happening more in the supers. In the dogs group, we call that train for success, because that's where you go from being a pretty good swimmer who can swim the events and might qualify for a state meet or final at divisionals to a highly competitive athlete at the state and regional level in the dogs group. And the type of training that they do in the dogs is rigorous because it's trying to get kids ready to compete at the highest level. And I'll save that. But yeah, that's that. And then by the time they get on to senior one, that's the highest, competitive group on our club. And if you're in the senior one group, you're training for what we call the sectionals meet. You're training for junior nationals and all that kind of stuff by the time that you are in senior one, maybe senior nationals, maybe Olympic trials, and going on to a college roster. And then there's also our other 2 senior groups, senior flex and senior 2. And so for those, we want those swimmers to be competitive members of their high school and summer league teams. So when they participate in senior flex or senior 2, we want them to go back to their summer league teams and be one of the fastest swimmers and be an assistant coach and do all those things, And swimmers can still obviously go from the senior flex and particularly the senior 2 group, which is still a pretty rigorous group, senior 2, and go from there up into senior 1 and swim in college. We have put swimmers on college rosters from senior flex and senior 2 the last couple of years. So it's definitely something that we still do. And we've had swimmers move up from senior 2 and into senior 1 and so on. So measuring progress through practice. We'll get practice here first, then we'll go meets. There's a few ways we do that. We measure a swimmer's progress in practice. First of all is what a lot of coaches around the country might call a test set. I tend to use the word progress sets because I think it's more accurate of what's actually happening, because we use them as a way to track a swimmer's progress. We're not like, it's not pass or fail. It's literally just like, how are you doing and what progress have you made? And so these progress sets are progressive. In the pups group, for example, they'll do a progress set in the coming weeks here where they swim 8 50s. So 8 times 50 just means 8 50s. At sign is their interval. So their interval is 1:15, and it would be freestyle swim. And your goal of this progress set is literally just make the interval. You don't necessarily have to have the best technique in the world or whatever. You're trying to show what you can do in terms of making an interval and keeping up with the set. We'll take that same set in the super pups and they'll do 8 100s on 1:30, or at least that's the goal interval that we'll go to. The super pups just did this set last week, actually, and the fastest group did it on a minute 45, but they'll do it again in a couple more weeks and they'll do it on a minute 40. Then a few weeks later, they'll do it on a minute 35, and then eventually they'll get down to 1:30. And by the time the super pups are able to swim 8 100s on a minute 30, that's probably a pretty good indicator that they might be ready for the dogs group before long. Because then you get to the dogs and all of a sudden it becomes 16 100s and your goal is to get down to making it on 120 or a minute 20, I should say. So these progress sets are progressive through our groups, and the super pups definitely emphasizes them. We're definitely in the swing of doing them right now. We just did another one tonight. And they're progressive over the course of the season. Like I said, like they're not as hard right now as they will be in a few weeks when we keep building our endurance. The GUPs do technically have some, and the senior group, like the senior groups and the GUPs also have progress sets, but with the GUPs, they're not as big of an emphasis as making your technique look good. And with the senior groups, they're more for your own personal knowledge rather than like moving up to the next group, for example. There's also the season cycle plan, the season plan cycle. So right now, I'll just speak on behalf of the super pups, for example, since that's my primary group. Right now, the first 6 weeks was basically like a preseason, almost like a stroke clinic, where I was just kind of teaching them drills and helping them just get acclimated to the season and learn what remember how to use a pace clock and pass somebody in the lane and do all the things you have to do. Right now with the super pups, for the last 2 weeks and the next 10, I'm in what I call the aerobic buildup phase. And so this is where their practices are going to get progressively longer each week. We're adding about 100 yards per week to the average practice length, and we're doing a lot more progress sets and stuff. And the reason I've included these season phases in here is because this is a great way to track your swimmer's progress. What they're going to be able to do by the time of the next 10 weeks when they're done with the aerobic buildup and we're getting close to Christmas break, they're going to be able to do sets in practice that they can't do right now. And it's crazy how fast the progress happens and how quickly they improve. Typically after Christmas, we'll do a quality phase where they are still swimming longer practices, but maybe the intervals are not quite so hard. The rest is a little bit more, and the focus is on really fast, high quality swimming. And then the super pups don't really taper a lot. That's more for dogs and especially seniors. But as kids get older, they'll have a couple weeks before our championship meet, whether it be state or divisionals or whatever they're focusing on, they'll do something called a taper. And so I like to share this with parents just so they know what the season is working towards and building towards, and they can see what the progress is like over time as the swimmers move through the different season phases. And these season phases will absolutely affect how your swimmer performs in a meet. So we just had the red and black meet, which was the only meet that happened in the preseason phase, and results were mixed. They were fine. Some best times, some not as much. That's kind of to be expected. Aerobic buildup phase is now. What I would expect from my super pups is a lot of them will be swimming longer events for the first time or for the first time in a while. So I would expect them to do pretty well on those and drop time on those. Their sprints maybe not quite as good as their longer stuff right now. But definitely over time, I expect them to get better on their sprints as well when we get into the quality phase, and then especially the taper phase at the end of the season when we do like a sharpening week or two where we just work on basically starts, turns, and sprinting. And that's why our kids usually do so well at divisionals, because we hit that taper at the right time and they do really well at the end of the season. And finally, for measuring practice progress, most of our groups, the GUPs, the pups, the super pups, the dogs, I think every group actually, I think every group on the team, as I think through it, has within the same practice, there will be a practice written that day, but there will be like an A version of it and a B version of it. And the A version is a little bit more challenging than the B version. And what I tell kids is we will put some of you on the A and some of you on the B. If you are on the B and you would like to be on the A, your job is to start making it look easy on the B. Be at the front of the lane, be one of the first swimmers in your lane, and swim hard and swim fast and make those look easy. And over time, when you've for a couple weeks made it look easy, we'll move you over to the A interval. And if it's a good fit over there, you'll stay. If it's still too much of a challenge, we'll move you back to the B a little bit longer. And if you're on the A, your goal there is to also make it look easy and to get to where you are mastering the A interval in practice. And if you're able to master the A interval for an entire course of a season or a majority of a season, that's probably also a good sign that you're ready to move to the next practice group. Now let's talk measuring meet progress. This is a huge one that I think a lot of you have probably tuned in for. And so here's what we are looking for at swim meets. First things first, we want swimmers, especially if they are dogs group and younger. So gups, pups, super pups, dogs. We want you adding new events to your event list. I don't like ABSCs philosophically, we don't want swimmers to be like, oh, I'm a breaststroker, so I'm only ever going to swim breaststroke. That's not really how our club operates. There's maybe a little more nuance to that by the time you get to like senior one, for example. Like maybe you might specialize a little bit more as sort of a shorter distance swimmer or a longer distance swimmer. But even then, those swimmers still stay pretty well rounded and will still do all types of workouts and swim every stroke in a meet. So adding new events to the event list is huge. If you've never done a butterfly race, then we're going to try to get you in a butterfly race pretty quick, no matter what group you're in. As long as we think you can do it in the meet, you know, you're likely to do it without getting disqualified or have a decent chance to do it without getting disqualified. And if maybe you've done a 50 breaststroke, but you've never done 100 or you've never done a 200, well, then we're going to try to get you in those pretty soon. And parents, it's normal for kids to be a little scared when that happens and a little bit unsure of themselves. It's totally okay. That's not the end of the world if they get spooked by the longer events, especially the first time they swim them. It's part of my job description as a coach to help coach them through that. And hopefully you as the parent will also be able to give them lots of encouragement. Other ways they can track their progress in meets is by going personal best times. So especially as swimmers compete with us several meets, they'll collect every time they do a new event and don't get disqualified, they will collect a personal best time in that event. And then the next time they swim that event, their goal is to beat that best time. And so if you're going personal best times, you're probably making a lot of progress and doing pretty well. That's a good thing. And it is important to keep those season phases in mind, like I talked about earlier, the preseason and aerobic buildup and quality. Like I said, there's, you know, they might go best times sprinting in the aerobic buildup phase, but it's not as likely. So just keep all that stuff in mind. Some other ways to track progress. I have 3 links right here. The first is USA Swimming motivational times. The next is the Georgia Swimming State qualifying times. And the third is the USA Swimming IMX and IMR document. So I'll just go over these really briefly. And what I'll do is when I send you guys the video after the fact, the recorded video, I will make sure to include the links to these. So if we follow the link to the USA Swimming motivational times, what we see here is, actually this is long course meters. So I'm going to scroll down to page 3, which is short course yards. Since we're in the short course yard season, the 50 meter or the 25 meter pool format. And what you have here is girls on the left, boys on the right, and the event list here in the middle. I'm not sure how to show you the middle, but the event list there in the middle. And you have the age groups. So you've got 10 and under times, 11 and 12 times, 13 and 14 times, 15 to 16 times, 17 to 18 times. So if I have an 11, 12 boy, I will look over in the boys column on the right and we'll scroll down to the 11 and 12 section. From there, they are broken down into, these are arbitrary time standards put together based on average data from USA Swimming's times database. So let's say my 11-12 boy goes a 36.50 in the 50 free. The B time, which is the slowest standard listed on here, is a 35.99. So if my 11-12 boy goes a 36, his new goal, or one of his new goals, should be to swim a 35.99, because that would now give him a B time. And so then once he's got the B time, sweet, congratulations, good job. Now let's go for a double B time. So you move over to the next column here, the double B, and you scroll down, and that one is a 33.39. As soon as he goes 33.39, he now has a double B time. Okay, awesome. He's making progress. Let's go over to the next column, the A time, and so on and so forth. Now, just so you know, most swimmers, when they start out, will be slower than a B time. And so their goals should be to try to get B times. After they've been swimming for a year or two, they're more likely to have B times. And so they're supposed to then try to get double Bs. After they've been swimming maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe 4, they should try to start getting A times. If they've been swimming 4 or 5 years, that's when maybe you can jump into the double A and triple A. And basically, in order to be a quadruple A time, you have to be one of the like top 16, top 20 swimmers in the nation. We do have those on our roster, but those with ABSC, but those are there's not many of them. That's few and far between. That's hard to get. And Georgia Swimming, the LSC that we're in, does a cool thing where if you get a AAA time at any point in time, because those are also extremely hard to get, those are harder than most of our state qualifying times. If you get a AAA time, they do something called an all-star towel where you'll get a Georgia Swimming towel with your name on it, which is pretty cool. So those are the USA Swimming motivational times. Like I said, it's arbitrary, but it's helpful for tracking progress. Now, the next one is the Georgia Swimming State qualifying time. So we are in the Georgia Swimming LSC. Our LSC championship is the Georgia State Championship. And there's a link on the Georgia Swimming website to their time standards page. You just go to times and time standards. And you can scroll down and see a bunch of the upcoming championship meets. So for the sake of example, the 14 and under state meet is coming up February of 2023. And so if I wanted to see the qualifying times for that meet, the 2023 age group state championships, I would click this Georgia qualifying times button, and then it would download the document for me. And then I can see the qualifying times. And similar to the motivational times I just showed you, if you look at this document, you can see girls on the left, boys on the right. There's a 10 and under age group, 11 and 12 age group, and a 13 and 14 age group. And if you're not familiar with the swimming jargon, the word age group often just means 14 and under. 14 and under / age group are kind of interchangeable. So when we call it the age group state championship meet, it really means, you know, the 14 and under state championship meet. So these are those times. So if let's say I have a 10 and under girl and she swam a 249, I don't know, I'm just making something up, but a 249 in the 200 free, I look at the 200 free, I look at girls, I look at 10 and under, and sure enough, that would beat the qualifying time of 251. So she is now qualified for the state meet. And that's how that works. The state times in Georgia, just so parents have reasonable expectations, are some of the hardest in the entire country because we have a very large LSC here in Georgia. So yeah, so the state qualifying times in Georgia are some of the absolute hardest. And particularly as swimmers get older, they get really tough. By the time you get to the 13-14 age group in the state of Georgia, the state qualifying times are pretty steep. And so it's really, I like to tell kids too, that they don't need to be sad if they've never made state, and they should be really happy if they do, because it's really like the top, 7 or 8% of swimmers in the state who are making the state qualifying times. That's how hard it is. It's a lot harder. If any of you have ever done summer league state, it's a lot more rigorous than that to try to make this meet. And so the last one I'll show you is the IMX, IMR, and IM Tough, which is another way to gauge progress. We haven't done a lot of this at ABSC in the past of emphasizing this, but I'm going to try it now. This year, we've decided to give it a try. So USA Swimming has something called IMX, which stands for I Am Extreme, and IMR, which stands for I Am Ready. And basically, if you're not ready for the IMX, you should try the I Am Extreme. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. If you're not ready for I Am Extreme, you should try the I Am Ready. So as an example, if you are 10 and under, you would look at the I Am Ready, and your goal is to swim a 100 free, a 50 back, a 50 breast, a 50 fly, and 100 IM in the swim meet. And so for our GUPs, we want them to try to complete that event, that list, and that's probably a good sign they're ready to move up to the pups. If you look over at the I Am Extreme, it's harder. It's a 200 free instead of a 100, and it's 100 back, 100 breast, 100 fly, 200 IM. So it's a lot more challenging. So they've got these for the 9 and 10 age group, the 11 and 12 age group, the 13, 14, and on up age groups. And USA Swimming actually keeps a database. So as you complete these, you get something called PowerPoints. And the faster your time is, basically the more PowerPoints you get. And you get, like, if you do really, really well on all these events, you can have a national IMX ranking where you might be ranked in the top 100 or top 50 or top 20 in the country. So something to keep track of. For ABSC purposes, I'm not as worried about your national IMX ranking. I more so want our swimmers completing these just as a way to gauge their progress and make sure they're swimming a wide range of events in the swim meet. So that's that. The last thing I'll say about meet progress is a quick note on tech suits. So those of you who are familiar may not even, or who are newer may not even know what a tech suit is, but a tech suit is basically a high quality swimsuit made out of certain fabrics that allow swimmers to go faster in theory. And typically they are more expensive than a standard suit. And at most of the championship meets, a lot of the 13 and over swimmers will wear tech suits. USA Swimming actually outlawed them for 12 and unders a couple of years ago, even at championship meets. And the reason they did that was because it doesn't make sense to have, at least, and I agree with USA Swimming on this extent. I don't really think it makes a ton of sense to have like an 11-year-old kid buying a $400 swimsuit. That seems like a barrier to entry for our sport that we don't really need. So I kind of agree with USA Swimming about outlawing them. Now, of course, the suit manufacturing companies like Speedo and Tier and all these other companies have now made new suits that are basically the same thing as a tech suit, but they meet whatever the threshold is. Like the seams are bonded instead of unbonded, and whatever. They go through this whole checklist that makes the suit approved, and it's honestly basically the same thing. And they're still very expensive, and parents are still spending a lot of money on them. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell a parent of a 12 and under that they can't buy a more expensive suit for their kid. I'm just going to tell you that I will probably not be doing that as a parent myself. So yeah, maybe when my kid is 13, 14, maybe I'll get her a tech suit then. But I'll probably hold off till then. If you have one, don't feel guilty, like wear it, especially at a championship meet. If you have it, if you've already spent the money on it, like definitely wear it, because they are popular for a reason. I don't know how much of an advantage they give, but clearly they give some sort of an advantage. And if nothing else, they give a big psychological advantage, which is why kids always wear them at championship meets. And I think the really nice tech suits really do give probably a pretty solid advantage. I know they compress your muscles, which helps. They help your buoyancy in the water. They help water pass off your body as you slice through it more smoothly. I didn't say that very articulately, but you get the point. So yeah, just a note on tech suits. ABSC does not have an official tech suit policy other than the USA Swimming rules, but those are just kind of some of my thoughts about them. Finally, as we get ready to wrap up here, I want you to keep in mind that progress for your swimmer is not linear. A swim season and a swim career are nonstop ebbs and flows. And any parent who's been on our team for more than one season has probably realized this by now. But I always like to just say it so people know that we always want progress to be steady and up and to the right and nonstop. And that's just not how it typically works with kids. So I found this chart that I find to be helpful. And I've actually drawn a version of this and shown it to the Super Pups on a whiteboard at Georgia Aquatic Center a few times. But people think success looks like continuous, never-ending improvement. What it actually looks like is a plateau and a dip and a leap, and then a new plateau, and then another dip, and then another leap. And in my 11 years of now coaching with ABSC, I have found this to be very, very true. I'll have kids that drop 30 seconds in an event, and then they won't drop time on it for a year. And then they drop 8 seconds again the next year, and then they won't drop time for 3 meets. And then they drop time 3 meets in a row. And it's just hard to figure out why. But that's typically, just so parents and swimmers have your expectations right, this is often what progress looks like. It's not perfect, it's not smooth, and it isn't always easy mentally. Some more things for you guys parents. Like I just said, your swimmer will not always drop time. Sometimes it will take a while for them to drop time, and sometimes they'll be discouraged. And it's important to remember that a lot of things affect this. For example, your swimmer may have had a great week of training and they should be ready to show up and drop time, but they show up at the swim meet and they're tired, or they're hungry, or they're sleepy, or they've been out of the pool for too long, or they're sore, or they ate too much for breakfast, or they've been sick, or they're getting sick. All those things can affect a swimmer's performance. And so it stinks that that's the case, but it is the case. And so we just ask that you give them love and reassurance no matter what. And I bring the example that my parents were newbie swim parents. They didn't know anything about swimming. And honestly, that was a great thing for me because they just tried to encourage me as much as they could when I was a swimmer, and I was a little bit of a head case, so I appreciated it. Point 2, are they a 10 and under pixie stick rule? That comes from Jerry Champer, who's a former UGA coach. He likes to joke around and say that, how do you get a 10 and under to drop time? You give them a pixie stick and they'll drop time. And it's a joke, but to an extent, it's kind of real. Like, you just never really know with young kids. And then you also got to keep growth spurts in mind. Did they just grow 3 inches? That might help them drop 10 seconds. It also might hurt their performance because now they don't know how to use their long limbs that they just got. You know what I mean? And so growth spurts are definitely a huge part of kids adding time or dropping time or whatever. Maybe if they haven't grown in a while, maybe that's why they've plateaued. But over time, their hard work will pay off. I like to tell parents, please, as much as you can, avoid bribing your swimmers. Obviously, the type of bribes we're talking about is like, hey, if you drop time, I'll give you like a candy bar. I mean, that's not the end of the world. But if it's like, I'll pay you $300 to go a best time right now, that's probably the type of bribe that you want to avoid doing with your swimmer, because in the end, what are we teaching them? Like, what's the point of us doing this in the first place if we're just bribing them for best times? There's a lot more going on for this that I, as the coach, hope they will get out of it than that. And ABSC, just so you know, we are not an Olympics or bust club. Yes, we are competitive. Yes, we do take things seriously. And yes, we do have fast swimmers. But at the end of the day, we support swimmers at all stages of life and ability and talent level and commitment level. And so if a swimmer is not setting the world on fire, they are not going to get kicked off our club. They are not going to get, punished or demoted or overlooked by the coaches or anything like that, because they all have equal value to us. So what do you do when your athlete is discouraged? First thing you're going to do is listen and support them. Next thing you're going to do, which I know most of you already do a really good job of, the next thing you're going to do is give it time, because every swimmer has a bad day. Every swimmer has a bad week. Most swimmers have a bad month. So give it time. Don't panic if they are feeling discouraged about their swimming progress. Try to keep it as positive as you can. I'm not saying be disingenuous or shut them off or whatever, but just keep it as positive as you can and supportive as you can. If they are discouraged for a prolonged period of time, have them please talk to their coach. If they are younger, they can talk with a parent and a coach. If they're older, maybe they want to talk to the coach by themselves or with the parent. Either way is fine. Reevaluate goals with them. Why are we doing this? What do we want to get out of this? And the coach, like as the coach, I like to help with that one, reevaluating goals. And at the end of the day, if they've been unhappy for a very prolonged period of time, it's not the end of the world to take a break, because our club is not all or nothing. You can leave and come back. You can take a break. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed, and it's not going to crush their swimming career, even though people think that it will. So to conclude, ABSC believes in the development of the whole child. Now, it looks like I'm about to run out of time here, which means I will also run out of time for Q&A. I think I made a mistake of starting my slideshow before I started recording, or starting my Zoom before I started recording. So what we'll do is I will email this to everyone and have an option for questions there. You can ask any questions that you might have. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I know it was broad. And like I said, whatever questions you have, we're here to help you. So have a great night and go ABSC. I will chat with you all before too long. Thank you guys.